So out of United's current midfield options, who is the best to partner Baleba in the midfield double pivot? Well, first of all, we should actually analyse what style of central midfielder Baleba actually is, in order to then assess who would provide the optimal stylistic balance, both in and out of possession. So Carlos Baleba, like Agoume, would fit the description of a front foot ball winner, which in Football Manager terms would be known as a stopper. However, given that Baleba is far more complete in possession than Agoume, he is very hard to pin down, and could be seen as a deeper line playmaker, or even a reducer at a side like Brighton. Although saying that, I do think at the elite level, he still has to improve his overall volume of creative and progressive passing in order to fully play that role, which is where he differs stylistically to someone like Adam Walton, though Baleba's ball carrying, ball winning and pressing ability kind of makes him a hybrid between a box-to-box midfielder and a ball winner, whilst he also has the press resistance and ball progressing ability in the first phase of play that you wouldn't usually associate with a defensive-minded midfielder. And so in Football Manager terms, the best role that I could categorise him as is as a segundo volante, which is essentially a box-to-box midfielder, a ball winner and a deeper line playmaker all in one, which is why his skill set is so unique and valuable because of the sheer variety of what he provides to the side both in and out of possession. See, both Baleba and Agoume are exceptional when it comes to anticipating passes into the opposition central midfielders, bursting out of the midfield line aggressively and looking to either jump in front to make an interception or apply pressure on their first touch before putting in a robust standing tackle. And so this makes both players offensive weapons either after a turnover in the counter press or when pressing aggressively in the opposition's build-up phase, or even being utilised in more of a trigger press during the opposition's settled possession in the middle third. On the other hand, whilst on the surface you could look at a midfield pairing of Agoume and Baleba and assume that with both being highly effective ball winners that they would provide the necessary balance from a defensive point of view, I do think stylistically there could be a clash between the two players. But before I get into that, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to okjersey.com. They've got the new Manchester United releases for the upcoming season, with OK Jersey also allowing you to pick up high quality football shirts from just £15, plus free shipping across Europe for all orders over £45. They sent me over these new release alternative Manchester United jerseys from this season, as well as a long-sleeved retro home shirt from the 92-93 season with Cantona 7 on the back, alongside this Nuno Gomes Benfica shirt from the 97-98 season as well. If you use code ALANTIS at checkout you'll get a discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. So why exactly do I think there could be a stylistic clash between Agoume and Baleba in the midfield double pivot? Well, it's because, as I said before, both players are stopper front foot ball winners, meaning that both naturally want to be pushing out of the midfield line aggressively. This pairing at times could leave massive amounts of space vacated in the centre of the pitch, but this wouldn't necessarily be an automatic issue, as with the right coaching, training and tactical instruction, they could mould their games to being less aggressive in certain situations. When the ball is on Baleba's side, he's the one to push out, with Agoume then recognising this and sliding across to hold a deeper position, playing a covering role in this phase of play, and vice versa on the other side when Agoume is pushing out, with Baleba then being the player to move across and cover. However, whilst Baleba is just as good at playing a covering role due to his pace over longer distances on the recovery and reading of the game, which allows him to race over and break up opposition attacks when the opposition beats United's press, Agoume's speed when pushing up vertically to join the press is not as effective over longer distances when having to shuttle across horizontally on the cover. And so this is why I say that if Baleba was signed, Agoume would likely be the one that you choose to move on from a perspective of stylistic balance in the squad. However, personally, out of Agoume and Casemiro, I think I'd prefer to move on Casemiro this summer, because from a PSR perspective, you'd save an extra £12 million in salary for next season compared to shifting Agoume. And also this season, if you sell Agoume, he needs to go for at least £33 million in order to break even on the books, which is his likely valuation, but next season it would only be around £25 million. Allowing you to make some profit when you're selling him, with Casemiro going on a free next summer anyway, and so ideally if he was sold to Saudi Arabia for at least £15 million this summer, and Agoume could be sold next summer, United could bring in around an extra £20 million in PSR profit, compared with selling Agoume this summer. Also, whilst I wouldn't say that Agoume excels when having to operate as a covering ball winner, None of Casemiro, Mainoo or Bruno Fernandes have greater speed across longer distances than Agoume anyway, and so it's not as if United have a better alternative in the squad. Well, not in the first team squad anyway, unless Amorim decides to give Sekou Kone the minutes I think he should have got at the end of last season, and during this summer in pre-season as well. If Kone had been integrated into the first team at the back end of last season when there was nothing to play for, as well as throughout pre-season, then I think by the start of the new year, you could make a valid case that a midfield double pivot of Kone and Baleba would have actually been the midfield double pivot that provided the best stylistic balance, due to Kone having the acceleration over short distances to perform the role of a stopper ball winner, whilst also having the pace over longer distances, as well as the sliding tackling ability to be perfectly suited to playing a covering ball winner role as well, providing the security to then allow Baleba to do what he does best, which is jumping forward and looking to win the ball back high up the pitch in the press. Now, even though their skill sets vary massively, I think any one of Agoume, Bruno, Mainoo and Casemiro alongside Baleba all offer around the same level in terms of stylistic balance, depending on the opposition, but it would restrict Baleba's front foot ball winning ability somewhat and force him to play more of a covering conservative role. I still think that with the current set of midfield options in the squad, a midfield 3 in a 5-3-2 moving to more of a 3-5-2 when pressing high is the optimal tactical setup for the side in this phase of play, providing greater coverage in the centre of midfield, protecting all four of Bruno, Casemiro, Mainoo and Agoume significantly more than in a midfield double pivot, with the risk of being isolated and overloaded in a midfield 3 compared with a midfield double pivot being significantly reduced due to each individual player in the midfield line not having to cover as great an amount of distance. However, this raises the question, if Amorim was to move to more of a midfield 3 when pressing high, who would then be best suited to playing alongside Baleba? Well, the system in possession in terms of the possession shape and the ball progression strategy in the 3-4-3, kind of a 3-4-2-1 shape, would still remain the same, as in the middle third you'd still utilise that box midfield with the two interior forwards in the half space, with Bruno Fernandes being utilised as the right-sided interior forward, with Kone playing from the left, with one of them dropping into the midfield 3 when United are looking to press high up the pitch, sometimes Bruno Fernandes, sometimes Kone, depending on which is necessary, with the other one forming a front 2 with Sekou when United are pressing high up the pitch in the opposition's defensive third during their build-up phase. Compared to that 2-3 shape that we see at the top of Amorim's pressing system, where the front line is wider than the midfield line, now with the extra player alongside Baleba, it's easier to cover the space in the centre, with the front 2 working in tandem with the 3 behind in order to cut passing lanes centrally and force the opposition wide, wherefrom you can then use this as a trigger for the wing back on that side to squeeze up the pitch, with the rest of the team squeezing over and looking to box them in. I think this more conservative pressing shape would be far better for all three of Agoume, Casemiro and Mainoo, and so the answer to who would be the best partner for Baleba would depend on what is required against certain opposition. Ruben Amorim could use Agoume and Baleba together as counter-pressing weapons after turnovers, when pressing in the opposition's build-up phase, or when using a trigger press in the middle third, which could be highly effective at allowing you to create high-value chances on the transition after you win the ball, as you would have two of the best front foot ball winners in world football in the same midfield. Now, of course, it would require work on the training ground in order to get Baleba and Agoume's pressing coordination and communication up to scratch, with each of them having to be aware of when they need to hold a deeper position, providing the necessary cover to allow the other to be released further forward into the press, as I said at the start of the video. Or if Amorim incorporated greater tactical flexibility, he could move to more of a traditional 3-5-2, using Casemiro or Mainoo between Agoume and Baleba, providing security in behind to then allow both of these two to be more aggressive in the press. Although that being said, because Baleba does offer the same level, if not a greater level of front football winning ability in the press as Agoume, but substantially more in possession, with Agoume being a lot more limited, this would probably be reserved for specific game plans such as against the likes of Liverpool or Manchester City. The majority of the time, I think if you're using Kone and Bruno in these kind of hybrid roles as interior forwards in the front line, but also as roaming playmakers when moving deeper into the midfield in possession, or when holding a deeper position in the press, I think I would prefer one of Mainoo or Casemiro alongside Baleba, and to be honest, either one could be a good shout. However, I would actually propose using both, Not at the same time, obviously, but maybe starting with Mainoo alongside Baleba, with Bruno and Kone ahead, and bringing on Casemiro either at half-time or maybe 10 minutes into the second half. With the benefit of this being that with both players knowing that they're only going to be playing between 40 to 60 minutes in the match, they now don't have to worry about conserving their energy as much, allowing them to make sprints, forward runs, and apply pressure that they would otherwise refrain from doing in order to not get completely burnt out. Amorim has to start using those 5 subs better throughout matches, and we also have pretty much one game a week for the majority of the season, so by frequently switching the central midfielder alongside Baleba earlier on in the game than usual compared to last season, this should allow us to retain a higher energy level in the midfield consistently throughout the match. If you're chasing the game, pushing for a goal, you would expect to be dominating possession a lot more, not having to press and cover as much ground out of possession, and so you could drop Bruno Fernandes alongside Baleba, using a front three of Sekou with Agoume and Kone either side, without having to sacrifice Bruno's playmaking ability. And so overall, long term, I think Sekou Kone is the best stylistic fit to play in a midfield double pivot with Baleba, but for this season, it really could be any one of Agoume, Mainoo, Casemiro or Bruno, depending on the opposition, game state and the tactical plan, though I still don't think any of those 4 are ideal for a midfield double pivot, even alongside an absolute ground covering machine like Baleba, which is why I think it would be beneficial to use Bruno Fernandes from the right of the front three, playing a hybrid role between the front and midfield line, depending on the phase of play. So let me know who you think would be the best option to partner Baleba out of the current midfield options. And if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to okjersey.com. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for a discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. And if you do want to sign up to my Patreon to get access to any of the plot graphs or my articles, I'll leave it linked on the end screen now as well.